Welcome back. You're still watching Network Africa right here on Channels Television. Just a reminder of our top story. The president of Sudan, Omar Al-Bashir, who is wanted for war crimes, is very close to home as he is flown from South Africa, and the move has preempted a court ruling over an international warrant for his arrest. Joining us in studio now is Dr. Godwin Okeke, who is a political scientist, and he's been monitoring this case very closely. Dr. Okeke, we're very glad to have you on the program. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me.
Now, how do you see this case?
Well, I think it's an interesting development from the perspective of a sitting president being, warrant arrest being issued against him. It would have been very difficult for South Africa to submit Bashir to the ICC because of further implications of what would have happened. But beyond that, I think the claim that African leaders are making that the ICC is targeting African leaders is just like chasing in the wrong direction, because of the fact that African leaders themselves have not been able to put in place a proper mechanism for resolving the series of conflicts in Africa. Because if you look at the United Nations Charter, specifically Chapter 8, covering Articles 52 to 54, it talks about regional arrangement. But how do they collapse this? The Central Africa is there. In the case of Burundi, for instance, East Africa is there. But at what point in time should the AU come in terms of resolving the crisis with the regional bodies within Africa, before reporting, for instance, to the United Nations Security Council, which has the primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. So these are, some of the wider dimensions we should be looking at. Now,
you just mentioned what the implications would have been. I would like to ask you, what do you think those implications might have been if the president of Sudan did not leave South Africa?
Yeah, if we look at the case of Kenya, for instance, the Kenyan people, actually showed themselves in the foot at a point in time where they wanted to prevent Uhuru from contesting the election. Eventually, they were regretting it. But in the case of Sudan, if South Africa had submitted him to the ICC, it would have, for instance, triggered up some other levels of crisis within the African sub-region. And you know that Sudan itself and its allies, they have some kind of volatile, nature that can, lead to some terrorist group coming up in one way or the other within the African, South Africa in itself.
So there would have been more to lose than gain if he hadn't left?
I think so, because South Africa would have looked at the cost-benefit analysis. In as much as, remember that Zuma said that aside from the diplomatic immunity that the Sudanese president enjoys, that he also personally invited him. Yes. And I think they also know the implications of, submitting him to ICC. That was why they quickly probably asked the man to leave.
So how do you think this is all going to play out at the end of the day, now that he's probably back in Sudan?
Well, it depends. We have to kind of monitor his movements in terms of the places he goes to. And at the end of the day, the issue would be, how do African leaders want to resolve issues concerning African countries? Because we continue to talk about African solutions for African problems. But we cannot see that. We see a situation where we have, book provisions in the either the Constitutive Act of the African Union that talks about Article 40, talks about continental mechanism for the resolution of African conflict. And beyond that, we talk about a situation where they actually implement this by bringing about the political will to, bring all these leaders who are erring in Africa to, call them to order so that they stop oppressing their people in one way or the other.
Now, what do you think is going to happen in the future when President Bashir gets invited for other events that are outside of his country, with what we just saw play out in South Africa? Do you think it's going to limit the way with which he travels? He's traveling basically.
I think he would limit the number of travels he will make, and I think, but at the end of the day, I think they will eventually get at him, because he cannot continue to rule Sudan forever. By the time he leaves office, if he escapes being arrested outside his country, by the time he leaves office, in one way or the other, he's going to answer for his sins.
Well, Dr. Okeke, thank you very much for your analysis. We appreciate your time as always.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Godwin Okeke is a political scientist from the University of Lagos in the Political Science Department. Well, we're going to look at other developments in nearby South Sudan. A lot has gone on during this year's AU summit, and one of the issues which was tabled is the South Sudan crisis. The African Union Peace and Security Council has threatened to take measures against any warring party in South Sudan that will continue to defy continental and international peace efforts aimed to end the 18-month-long civil war in the country. This came in a communique released on Saturday, June the 13th, following reports presented by the Council by both chairpersons of the AU's Commission and the Intergovernment Authority on Developments, that's IGAD, on the general situation in South Sudan. When we come back, we bring you the latest on the ongoing AU summit in Johannesburg. Join us again.